As darkness still cloaked the southeastern coast of China, sudden deep rumbles tore through the silent night. At exactly 3:12 a.m. on April 15, 2027, dozens of Dongfeng 16 and Dongfeng 11 ballistic missiles were launched from Fujian province, streaking across the Taiwan Strait at hypersonic speeds. Mere minutes later, powerful explosions rocked Taipei, Taichung, and Kaohsiung. Taiwan's critical cities plunged into chaos and fire. This was no drill, it was war, real, immediate, and devastating. For years, Beijing had issued warnings about its so-called red line, that any declaration of Taiwanese independence or foreign interference would trigger the use of force. Now, that threat had manifested into full-scale military action under the name Operation Thunderstrike, a campaign built on overwhelming shock and speed, aimed at crippling Taiwan's defenses before any Allied response. The strategy was based on a two-ad anti-access area denial using DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles to shut down the Western Pacific, preventing U.S. carrier groups and Japanese forces from intervening. Over 300 combat aircraft, including J-10Cs, J-16S, and stealthy J-20S, were launched from airbases across China's eastern seaboard, surging into Taiwanese airspace to establish air superiority. At sea, massive amphibious assault groups including Type 071 and Type 075 landing ships crossed the strait, loaded with tens of thousands of troops, tanks, and armored vehicles. Their target, strategic beaches like Tamsui, Hualien, and the port of Kaohsiung. Special operations teams from the PLA had already infiltrated the island to sabotage communications and disrupt command structures from within. But Taiwan did not fall. Within minutes, PAC-3 Patriot missile batteries were activated. Though some radar installations had been struck, others managed to detect incoming threats. Dozens of Chinese missiles were intercepted mid-air. Along the coastline, Taiwan's Xiangfeng 2 and 3 anti-ship missile systems opened fire, sinking or damaging multiple landing craft. Despite heavy losses from the initial strike, Taiwan's Air Force scrambled what remained. F-16 Versus and Mirage 2000 seconds roared into the skies, clashing with waves of Chinese fighters above Taipei. Meanwhile, domestically built loitering munitions and suicide drones shocked Chinese forces by destroying at least 2 advanced destroyers. Taiwan's strategy was clear: hold the cities, demolish critical infrastructure to slow enemy movement, and buy time for U.S. and Allied intervention. They understood that China could not sustain a prolonged amphibious operation, especially if the fight turned into a grinding, urban war of attrition. In Washington, the National Security Council was convened in emergency session. The U.S. president called the assault the most dangerous act of aggression in the Indo-Pacific since World War II. Within hours, carrier strike groups USS Ronald Reagan and USS George Washington were ordered to leave Yokosuka and sail directly into the Philippine Sea. From Guam, Okinawa, and Wake Island, B-1B Lancers and B-2 Spirits took off, sending a message: the U.S. would not stand aside. Japan, South Korea, Australia, and even the UK quickly expressed deep concern and pledged humanitarian and logistical support for Taiwan. NATO held an emergency meeting. Beijing, in turn, issued a stern warning: any outside interference would be met with appropriate military consequences. As U.S. carrier groups closed in east of Taiwan, combat intensified. U.S. Virginia-class submarines launched Tomahawk cruise missiles at Chinese logistical hubs in Fujian and Guangdong. China responded with DF-27 hypersonic missiles aimed at U.S. naval vessels. What followed was a modern sea battle involving submarines, stealth jets, drones, cruise missiles, and electronic warfare in a deadly convergence. On the ground, Taiwanese special forces and civilian militias began a full-scale insurgency in Taipei. Every apartment block, metro tunnel, and street corner became a fortress. The PLA, trained for rapid domination, found itself bogged down in urban warfare. Resupply from the mainland became increasingly difficult as ports were bombed, and U.S. air superiority grew over the Central Strait. 3 weeks in, the war showed no sign of slowing. China's initial expectation of a rapid victory began to fade. Though PLA troops had secured several coastal positions, pushing inland toward the capital had turned into a brutal and costly grind. Back home in China, the official narrative of a swift reunification was cracking. Even under tight censorship, reports of mounting casualties, destroyed warships, and stalled offensives began to leak. Small-scale protests erupted in Shanghai, Guangzhou, and even Beijing, with citizens demanding to know why their sons were dying in what was supposed to be a quick and surgical operation. Meanwhile, in Taiwan, national unity reached unprecedented levels. Citizens from all walks of life, students, workers, business leaders, mobilized to assist the military effort. Though part of the legislature had been evacuated, Taiwan's parliament continued broadcasting, sending one clear message to the world: Taiwan still stands. Internationally, Taiwan launched a powerful global media campaign. Massive pro-Taiwan protests broke out in cities like New York, Tokyo, Berlin, and Paris, demanding action against China and emergency relief for the besieged island. 3 possible Engamez global strategists modeled dozens of scenarios, but 3 stood out as the most likely outcomes. Scenario 1. Chinese withdrawal under pressure, facing military stalemate, soaring casualties, and unprecedented domestic unrest, plus overwhelming sanctions. Beijing could declare its objectives achieved and withdraw, but the political fallout at home would be devastating, and its global reputation would suffer for decades. Scenario 2. Frozen conflict and ceasefire after months of bloodshed. Both sides might agree to a ceasefire brokered by the UN or a neutral power. Some coastal areas may fall under Chinese control, while Taiwan's core government remains intact. A demilitarized buffer zone like the Korean DMs would form, locking the region into a tense, permanent standoff. Scenario 3. Escalation into regional or global warshold. Either side cross a red line, say China strikes Guam or the US bombs mainland China. The war could spiral. Regional powers like Japan, Australia, India may be drawn in. Tactical nuclear weapons could even come into play. The world would inch dangerously close to World War III.